Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Automate to Collaborate, with Alejandro Sanchez-Giraldo. I hope I said that correctly. So Alejandro is a Test Innovation Manager at Vodafone. He's quality engineer, blogger, and community contributor with over a decade of experience building test automation frameworks for companies in a variety of verticals, including telecom, travel, and media. So without any further ado, I will turn this now over to our speaker, Alejandro.
Thanks, Adi, and thanks everybody for joining me today on this really exciting topic for me. So pretty much today we're going to have a bit of experience going through this session around automation and collaboration. I hope you enjoy. Again, thanks to Apply Tools for providing this opportunity for us to engage and share some of the things that we learn within our day-to-day work. So automate to collaborate. Now, test automation's been a tool used for many years. It's decades, and is some of the things that we use to probably most commonly develop software or look at how we can automate some of our current manual processes. Now, during my 13 years career as a quality engineer and advocate, I've worked with teams that have implemented really good solutions and automation. But I've seen other implementations that actually made teams be disjointed and not collaborate. So hopefully what you'll see through this presentation is 3 key areas that I want to showcase around how we can actually look at how we improve the process of automation to ensure social engagement and collaboration. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Avengers, but this is Thor's hammer, right? Now, if you think of a tool, you think of this great tool as a worthy hammer to save the galaxy if you're worthy of it. But you wouldn't use this tool to just drive a nail through your wall. You know what will happen. So the 3 key areas that I'll be talking through today are some of the things that I use on my day-to-day and I work with my teams. So some of the main things probably resonate to you if you're in an agile environment, and some of them might not. Again, part of it is due to the way that we socialize. It actually has to do a lot of how we actually deliver software. So celebrating failure is one of the topics that we'll go through it. It's a really interesting time of when I was doing mobile automation, and yeah, it was actually some of the things that I learned the most during that period. Sustainable teams. So I've worked with teams from all around the world, and one of the things that I've always passionate about is how you can actually ensure your team is able to do some of this work and scale up. And social automation, which hopefully I will also provide a little bit of a demo of some of the really new technologies and trends that are happening this day to enable us to actually interact. So I don't know if you've seen the Netflix documentary, The Last Stand, but this is a quote that I really enjoy when I was watching this movie, and it resonated with me. So I fail over and over, and this is why I succeed. This was Michael Jordan during his career of 13 years of becoming one of the greatest basketball players and one of icons, right? Now, as part of celebrating failure, so what happened to me around 2015, we experienced a catastrophic loss of data that crippled our company over 8 to 13 days on how they could actually generate revenue. Now, everybody was on the edge. I was lucky enough to be led by a manager that was actually more interested on solving the problem rather than putting blame into the team. This allowed our team to actually work all together into implementing smarter ideas of how to solve this problem. And we did learn a lot around how we could improve our automation and monitoring of our environments. So how did we get there? So as part of, I guess, many people that has gone through cloud transformation experience, that the DevOps culture kind of tried to drive you to think about infrastructure as cattle rather than as a pet. So we were creating multiple instances of our environments, and one of the main things that was enabled us to do was able to actually deliver a lot of our change quicker. We were able to independently deploy EC2 instances, which then we were able to actually be able to use independently to deliver some of the changes that we wanted to do. But one of the problems that we had was the amount of quantity of instances that was not being cleaned up. So the process of cleanup wasn't really thought through, and there was very little tagging or annotation around infrastructure. So it was very difficult to really know what was it that needed to be cleaned up. Now, we were doing really well, but it was time consuming. Our team was actually going through the process of cleaning up. So if you look at this spreadsheet, this is what we were looking at every week to clean up our environments and looking around a manual process of identifying some of the things that we were able to clean up. And this was saving the company also lots of money. But we got to a point where there was infrastructure was built maybe before somebody was working in the company, or by somebody else that didn't have ownership of that anymore. And what happened is we took the approach of actually cleaning that, just because we thought, well, if it's been running and nobody owns it, it should be fine to delete. What happened next was this catastrophic event. We lost all of our data, as what we've deleted was our Solar instance that had all of our data that was able to actually enable our systems to work. So one of the main things that we learned from this, or myself included, was that tagging is one of the most requested features and popular automation tools, and is very critical to use. The right amount of tagging is going to be able to provide you lots of benefits: reporting, parallel execution, proper cleanup of your environments. So too many tags equal dilute your information. Not enough tags might put yourself into a pickle like we were feeling. So having a really good tagging strategy, it is critical for you to be able to get the most out of your automation. Now, as I was saying before, one of the passions I have is around sustainability. Now, when you think about sustainability, you think solar panels, you think about recycling, but you never think, well, what is the real concept of sustainability, or how is it that we can minimize our footprint? One of the most overutilized things that we have as a quality engineer, software engineers, or anybody that does development is time. We always complain we don't have enough time, that our time is very precious, and we are highly skilled to actually deliver change. So one of the things that I've been working on is around creating a strategy around how to enable my teams to be sustainable. I have read a couple of a blog around sustainable teams, so you can always go back and read it. But really what it is I've worked with teams from different places, from offshore, onshore, vendors, and permanent teams, right? And one of the main things is around how do you actually work together to ensure that your team holistically can sustain change. So in creating a culture of continuous innovation, automation MVP, and cross-skilling your team to succeed on what you want to do is a must on your tool belt. So the story around this area is I was working with a really smart quality engineer. He was very proficient at the automation tools that he knew how to use, and he was passionate about his product. Now, one of the challenges that I had was the mindset that he had. So he was a perfectionist. He wanted to give me the best solution possible to solve my problem. He was very proud about this. Now, one of the things is that we continue to work in this big bang manner when we are even working in agile environments. We're trying to solve solutions completely from day one, when the reality is that if you address your automation as a product, as agile, and provide and put agility into what is it that you want to do, it helps you to do some innovation. It tries to iterate, so your customer, which is your team, your squad, your company, will be able to benefit straight away into some of the little things that we do. And that's a critical component of how we actually automate as part of collaboration within our teams. Some of the other things that are really difficult around the way that we do things is actually sometimes we're private around not sharing our information, and we struggle to kind of have an open policy around how we discern this. So those are some of the other things that slow us down, and it doesn't encourage collaboration across teams. So as I said, the biggest challenge is around changing the members in mindset, and we continue to work in isolation. So really having this culture of iterative innovation is missing in most teams. And the reality is that we continue to complain that we don't have enough time to do so. But have you ever thought, why don't you take hold of your destiny and utilize your time better? Creativity and innovation is not something that happens overnight. It's something that it has to be continually delivering, and you have to continue to look around what are the things that the problems that you have, and use engineering ideas to actually solve that problem. Now, one of the key tasks that I have within my teams is I give them around 30 minutes every day or every week or every sprint to solve a problem. I challenge them not to have a problem that is related to delivery, but a problem that they have within themselves. Now, I give them, the team, clear expectations that I want them to try to solve a problem. I'm not asking them to solve the problem in 30 minutes. And I ask them to ensure that they can give us feedback into what are some of the things that they've found. So one of the great things about this is it enables teams to innovate and collaborate. By showcasing, it also helps the team members ensure that they're clear understanding of what they understand about the challenge that they had and how they approach it. And it also, by enable them to celebrate the failures when it didn't work, it helps them to try again. So one of the key things around this is more around ensuring that they tried every time to improve and do things differently, rather than continue to be successful on some of the things that they know and slow them into one of the things that they could do, or some of the things that they could actually learn out of this process. You will be surprised how many times they were able to actually learn a new skill that 6 months down the track, by them learning the skill, they were able to deliver some of the changes much quicker than actually they would have done if they were looking at the problem at that point in time. So it really brings me back to this collaboration and social automation. Some of the key areas around what I call social automation is how we actually utilize some of the automation concepts and how we solve a problem to socially communicate or solve the problems of others. It's not around building a robust testing framework that can solve every problem. It's around looking at small problems, break it down, and see what are the things that we can do from day to day to improve how our team, our squad, our company works. Now, in the last few years, I've been lucky enough to work on pet projects. And I guess as part of COVID hit, I had the ability to actually work with some of my colleagues due to not having a job for a period of time. And rather than actually sitting and thinking what was it that I wanted to do, we continued to collaborate to keep pretty much ourselves engaged with one another and learn new skills. So I took this opportunity to explore some of the different things that we were able to do, and what are some of the things that we were really excited about, the things that we were learning. Now, if we think about the DevOps culture, this is quickly emerging and changing the way that we do quality and look automation. And even beyond DevOps, there's the concept of ChatOps, SecOps, and other ways of delivering software that what they do is they actually enable us to automate that process, automate those challenges that we have. The reality is that most of the time, when we look at conventional automation execution that was done maybe 20 years ago, it would have done by individuals in their computer running their own automation scripts in their machines. As orchestration systems came, like Jenkins, Circle CI, Shippable, the idea was that we were able to automate the automation. And then as we go now into social interaction, how we can actually communicate effectively and how we can actually use those tools to solve these problems. Now, you think chatbot, and you probably think how you interact with a bank or just talking to a robot that kind of gives you some basic response. And the reality is that you can actually utilize that simple tool to solve some of your problems. And as we're looking at the new trends of chat operations or chat ops, it enables us to interact within what our space of or our ecosystem is. More and more people are starting to work with their mobile devices. If you look at the current way that people do work, you might see them more into their mobile phone than on their computer, either by sending Slack messages or approving certain things or triggering certain execution that they have already orchestrated. So we're becoming more and more attached to our mobile devices to do some of that work. So as we become more connected to our smartphones and becoming a main way of how we communicate or how we do business, it just makes sense to utilize these tools to improve the way that we communicate. Now, a good comm strategy or a feedback strategy is effective on how you can use this tool. One of the great things that I want to show you and also demonstrate a little bit of what is it that I was able to implement is the concept of a problem that we had. So the problem that we had was as a company, we were storing a lot of our information in Confluence, in Jira pages. We had lots and lots of valuable information, but it was very difficult for new team members or existing team members to actually look at how we could utilize that data. So one of the main common messages that I was seeing across the Slack messages was, Bob, where is that spreadsheet that you have with all of that test data that I can use? Or Jane was messaging, Addy, can I please have access to that spreadsheet that you've stored somewhere so we can actually use the test data? So the concept of get data came into idea. This was a simple POC where I was able to orchestrate some of the technology that we have. Again, this wasn't a test automation framework. This was just as part of how we can provide data to our customers, or in this case, the users, which were product owners, testers, developers, where one of the main problems they had was how to access data. We were able to have just a simple Express server that we were able to deploy in Heroku. And by implementing some of the connectivity with a Slack bot and / command, we were able to provide this simple data to the customers. In this case, some of the things that they were able to do, we had an MVP of this product. The MVP of this product was pretty much just getting some static data and just present to them. So I'll show you what I mean by this concept. So if you're familiar with Slack, you can have a lot of information that comes through. This is how most teams are starting to socialize. So as you can see in your image on the right, you have everybody on their mobile device, everybody in their computer doing their work. You might have somebody saying, okay, Bob, where is my data? Now, Bob might have gone for lunch. He might not know what I'm talking about. And this then becomes a lot of time that you're wasting. So the idea of the / command of give me data came. The initial concept of give me data was just to provide all of the data and how to make it easy and accessible to everybody. Now, this is not going and generating data. This is just solving the problem that they already had solved with a Confluence page, just a different way. Now, as we did the first MVP of this product, it was great. All of my data was there. But one of the things that we noticed is as we were adding more and more data, it was very difficult for our team members to actually look at, okay, I actually just need this particular type of data, or I just need this handset that has certain attributes to it, right? Now, don't worry, all of this is just dummy data. I haven't just posted everybody's personal information in this in this webinar. Now, part of what we were doing as part of the second MVP was make it a little bit easier for people to find the data. So what if I wanted SIMO? I was then able to just get the particular subset of data, and that was solving my problem. As this was propagated across all different channels, one of the main things that I noticed was the messaging of where is that Confluence page disappear. More and more people were able to use this simple technology to just get your test data. Now, how does all of this comes together and how easy or hard it is? As I mentioned below, there was some orchestration that I had to do, and some of these packages are actually out of the box. So, with further ado, we'll show you the Express Data POC. It's a simple post command that we have. The MVP is just a prototype that we had where we were able to use Slack integration, Message Builder, Express Server, and Heroku for deployment. It's no more than a few files, and a lot of these packages are already out of the box. It's just a simple package where it's able to just tell you where the information comes and goes from, and it's just a simple switch case of where we can actually segregate some of that data. Okay. Now, the exciting thing was, okay, how we make it available for Slack to consume. Now, Heroku was able to actually provide this solution very easy. I didn't have to go to too many places to ask for, can I please have a server where I can deploy my API, and then having to go through the whole concept of, okay, where are we going to host it, what domain name, and so on. As part of integrating GitHub with Heroku, I was able to actually be able to very easily integrate my server, host it, and deploy it. Now, it is as simple as if I have any change that I want to do. So for example, in this case, I just want to do a simple markdown change on my comment where I'm able to just make that change, either adding more data, removing more data, going through a normal pull request process. And as I merge this, it goes through the process of deploying in the backend. Now, the way that I connected these two with Slack was by creating an API Slack. So anybody that has access to their admin console within Slack is able to create a Slack API. And some of the features that you might need to add are the / commands, the bots, and permission. So again, if you go back to my diagram here, what you need from Slack is the bot, which is the one that is going to be doing the polling, and the / command, which is the one that is going to be doing that pretty much the connectivity between your Express server and Slack. Now, as we look, not that one, sorry. Let's go back to here. Now, as all of this is integrated, the / command is just simple orchestration of what is it that you want to do. Short description, again, try to be with concise, especially as we work in a mobile, in a reduced space, how we can actually reduce the amount of information that we need, but make it important. Now that's completed the deployment, and that's been sent. Now, as you can see, part of the communication is that, again, I'm telling people I have made a change, I have made an improvement. You can use this new functionality now. So if we go to give me data, SIEM only, let's SIEM only, she'll take both, right? That didn't work. So clearly I haven't done that correctly. It's SIEM only. Okay, so as you can see, we've added just a particular new feature, which is SIEM only attach. Again, part of the critical things around we working as part of communication is being able to provide visualization of what is it that we want to do, be able to provide concise information of what is it that we are trying to provide. So if you look at the examples of what GitHub has done within Slack is some color visualization, some basic information of what you want to do. Is it completed or not? Then the capability is around you have your full capability or you have your basic capability with some added new features. But this helps us to communicate and engage with each other. And it solves problems of how is it that we can do some of that work. Now, if we go back to presentation here, right? Now, some of the things that we look around automation is around how we're looking at continuous deployment and how we can actually enable some of that to be actually as part of the orchestration process, as part of the communication as we working together, what are some of the things that we need to do. Now, some of the key areas that I continue to work on are part of the continuous deployment concept around fully automated and scripted pipelines, are some of the things that enable us to continue to work closely within developers ourselves. Integrated testing the pipeline. So some of the things are we need to ensure that the tests are fast and reliable. Each story to be able to be deployed independently is part of the things that we actually want to do when we're looking at that continuous deployment for the maintenance is part of the definition of done. But really the part that I really feel is important and when you're looking at continuous deployment is the pipeline has good feedback mechanisms. So as I show you in what we had in Slack was some of that information that actually goes in and provides you the feedback of are your tests passing? Is your security check completed? Do you need to go to another tool and validate what are some of the things that you've done? And some of these are the main things that help you collaborate and deliver quality products. Now, one of the great things that I like about ApplyTools, now that we're actually into an ApplyTools webinar, is that the tool is actually, I call it more a collaboration tool rather than a visual validation tool. And what I mean by that is that you have the capability to centralize a lot of information into this tool. Some of the things that I've used in the past is around the tagging mechanism. So when we're labeling a specific images within the branches, within the environments, all of these things enable me to actually get better information from the tool. The second part of it is around the feedback mechanism. So how I can actually go into the tool and provide alternative feedback to other parts of the team. So one of the things that I like is more how you integrate people to come into the tool and collaborate. So how do you go into a visual validation tool or a security check tool to check your statistical analysis, and how you can actually put the feedback into the tool and then send it back to either Slack messages, Teams, and how you can collaborate between all of those different aspects of the team to come together and solve the problem. Now, some of the other things that we're looking at as part of what some of the tools are doing these days are machine learning and AI. Now, one of the main things that we're looking at as part of AI and machine learning is how we can actually reduce the amount of effort that can be done by the compute system. So we have apply tools allowing us to do some of that analysis by providing lots of information and data, and then enable us to actually concentrate on what is it that we're working on. So is it the visual validation in a specific area, or is it a specific analysis within the code of the image that is not working? Or you can have a look at other tools like Eggplant, and there is also from Curiosity Test Modeler or Acel LQ, where they actually enable you to visualize or create in demand with some of simple machine learning, create scenarios and create some of that information upfront and at a quicker pace. So some of those aspects are where we're heading towards in regards to how we can actually implement automation and make it sociable. One of the things I believe is we're moving away from scripting and coding and more becoming orchestrators of multiple applications to enable us to solve this problem. And with that note, I just want to say the future is very exciting, and some of the tools that we will see within the next few years are some of the things that will enable us to socialize and communicate with each other. Now, I want to have some time for questions. Eddie?
Yeah, sure. First question. Have you had a chance to explore machine learning and artificial intelligence on top of your automation efforts?
So some of the things that I mentioned before are things that I've been able to explore, but the only AI or machine learning I've been able to implement is really around apply tools with the visual grid and the AI validation. But as I mentioned before, there are multiple new tools that are enabling us to orchestrate, and a lot of them, they're codeless orchestration tools. But what they do is a lot of automation that works within their within out of the box to then use machine learning and AI to provide you with specific paths and give risk analysis around what are some of the things that you should cover. So I've done some of that investigation, but there's been very little of the work that I've actually been able to implement, saying that it's an emerging technology, and I'm really excited to see what are some of the things that we can do next.
So another question in the area of ML and AI. Do you think that AI and ML will be the magic bullet against flaky automated tests?
So I think one of the main things around machine learning and AI is that they will help us solve many of those small problems like flaky tests or data generation or some of that simple logic. But the reality, as I'm trying to emphasize in this webinar, is it will enable us to actually utilize us as human beings to create more tools that provide us feedback to be able to deliver some of the requests from our teams faster. So I don't think it will be a magic bullet, but I think it will definitely assist us in the way that we can actually work and enable us to actually think more about the problem rather than trying to solve the solution.
In the middle of your slide, you have each story can be deployed independently.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, definitely. So this almost goes back to the concept of tagging and ensuring that that you can actually be able to deliver change quicker within your team. So if you think around some of the work that you need to do it needs to be independent. So there's a lot of commentary around the early times when Cucumber came into place, for example, where some of the things that they highlighted is for you to be able to test or validate a specific feature quickly, you need to make sure that independently can work. So when you're able to do that, you're actually able to distribute your execution or your delivery, and you're able to then increase your productivity. So an example, you might need a scenario that actually logs in across different applications, but you might not need all of the applications. You might be able to actually provide some mechanisms so you can actually get a simulated response from all of the different applications, but be able to then test your application independently and be able to actually distribute that so you can do some of the validations yourselves. So a second example to that is around when you're doing visual validation, you really don't need a full end-to-end environment. You need an environment that is stable enough to be able to do a lot of your execution on different browsers, different devices, and be able to actually explode with Docker containers, or you can use, again, Applitools Visual Grid or Browser Stack. Some of those tools actually increase your execution power. So that's one of the things around ensuring that your tests are able to run independent, so you can actually distribute your load.
You discussed before about the relationship between DevOps and testing, and it sounded like you have a very special relationship of DevOps and QA and testing in your team and in your organization. Can you elaborate a little bit on that relationship and the handoff and how those two teams collaborate between them?
Yeah, definitely. Now, one of the key things is around the collaboration piece in the DevOps and QA space is actually, you wouldn't realize, but it needs to be very close. Now, one of the key aspects or the first principles of what the DevOps culture wanted to do was to actually deliver this code faster, but at the same time to be reliable. So one of the things that was always working closely with the DevOps and the QA team was how to implement some of the automation that you did to be able to be part of this delivery cycle quicker. Now, as I mentioned before, tagging, feedback mechanisms, parallel execution, you need to be able to make your feedback loops as fast as possible to enable the delivery that they want to do. And one of the things is that I continue to learn working closely with them, some of these new concepts around the deployment in the cloud, scripting what you're trying to execute so it's not manually orchestrated, and how you can actually then scale up much quicker and be able to provide feedback to each other to be able to deliver the overall change.
What are some of the things we can do in order to start automation in a group of small teams?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, because I think everybody, regardless of a small teams or big teams, they do struggle on how they can actually implement automation or any kind of change. It depends to the constraints that you have, but as I mentioned before, the sustainability aspect of my teams is around ensuring that I'm sure you still have 30 minutes of a sprint or a week where you can actually experiment, and some of the tools that are coming into place are enabling to spin up information much quicker. One of the examples I have is around trying to do a proof of concept of how to actually automate a website, for example. Now, you might want to say, oh, I want to really be hardcore and script everything and be able to actually set up a framework that I can actually scale very quickly. But the reality is that if every sprint or every month or every week, you're actually spending time manually doing a task, if you're able to just automate one of those tasks or one of those subtasks, like recording with a Selenium driver, just the flow. Yes, it might change, it might break, but if you're able to utilize again and again, it will save you some time to then spend some time into looking at other tools like, let's say, Cypress, where then you're not gonna be required to manage your Selenium drivers, and you can actually execute a lot of that much quicker, right? So it comes back to the concept of automation MVP. The automation MVP is around what is the minimum viable product of your automation that you need to do to be able to provide feedback or to provide benefit within your team. How you can actually ensure that once you have that culture, you maintain it so that you can actually deliver more change or be more robust into the change that you're doing. So one of the things I encourage people is spend a small amount of time, but do it over and over. That's one of the main principles also of DevOps. Repeat over and over so you become proficient in what you're doing.
Going back to the slide that you're showing now, second from the bottom is maintenance is part of the DoD. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, definitely. So definition of done. And I guess this is part of where influencing your team is critical to what you want to do. So as you start building your software, or as you start building your artifacts for automation and validation of what you want to do, you want to ensure that when you're working together as a team, part of the collaboration is that you ensure that test automation is part of your product. Nobody goes to the developers and say unit tests can't be executed as part of this, because they know that the unit test is critical for the quality of the product. So maintenance of your automation or orchestration of what is it that you need to validate, it has to be part of your definition of done of your stories. It has to be part of your day-to-day work. It has to be part of what makes a product, because one of the things is, as you're able to maintain that effectively and have processes in place to actually scale so other people can also do it with yourself, is when you're able to actually speed up your development of your application.
So you started this presentation and you talked a lot about culture and communication, which is super important. So in your hiring process, in your recruitment process, how do you make sure that people that you hire are a good cultural fit, or maybe that doesn't matter and you prefer to teach them on the job and make sure that they understand how you want to work? How do you keep that balance?
It's funny you ask. I was thinking about that the other day, and one of the things I realized is I actually implement a lot of this as part of my recruitment process. So one of the main things that I go through my recruitment process is providing not just the like a normal meeting with the candidate, but after we go through that, we actually go through a process of giving them a technical challenge. Now, one of the things around this technical challenge is an impossible challenge to complete within the time frame I've given them. The reason for that is because I want to see how they communicate back to me. I want to see how you actually are able to tackle that problem and how you can break it and try to do it into a small way of working. Now, the majority of the people that are successful within that are not the ones that are able to automate everything or tackle every problem, are the ones usually that are, just give me enough, but they always are looking for opportunities of learning more. So they always come back and said, I have completed this specific task, but if you give me more time, I can complete this other task. So it's more the attitude that we're looking for rather than the proficiency. Because one of the main things, as I mentioned before, changing the mindset is difficult. If I can change the mindset from day one as part of the interview process, it's gonna be much easier as we start to work together.
And keeping on the topic of communication, you mentioned your comms strategy. and that might be easier within the QA or testing or test automation team. But how do you do that with maybe non-technical members of the organization?
Yep.
Who's in charge of that, and how do you manage those gaps in knowledge?
Yep. So one of the key aspects of what I continue to kind of emphasize within this webinar is around the concept that you have to try something small. You have to try to look at what are you capable, or what is it that you're able to achieve within your team or yourself, and how is it that you're able to communicate that effectively. Now, I wrote a small article in a LinkedIn around, again, it's around this automation to collaborate. It was around what are some of the 4 key areas that enable you to actually be effective at communicating with non-technical people, right? Again, as you see, the communication channels are changing rapidly. You're using more Slack, you're using more Teams, so you have to be, first of all, concise. Second of all, clear on what is it that you're trying to do. One of the aspects that I encourage people is to use visual tools, emojis or images or tables, right? And it has to be fast, right? Everybody wants information straight away. So pretty much like the example of give me data to solve that specific data problem, if you're able to create your communication strategy around what is it that you're doing in a manner that is clear for other people to understand, then is very effective, and that's one of the key aspects of collaboration. We really need to go back to the concept of how we actually interact with people rather than how we automate things. Because when you do that, you're able to then understand much better what the problem might be, and you might be surprised sometimes you're actually not required to do a lot of the things that you need to do.
How many QA and dev members are in your team, and how long is the agile period?
Yeah, so all of that really depends on the maturity model of the teams. So you might have ratios where you actually have around 4 developers and 1 QA on 2 weekly cycles. But at the same time, that 2 weekly cycle might not be delivering completely things to production. It might be things that actually iteratively go and get deployed later on. I've worked on teams that actually have more QAs than developers. And a lot of that has to do with more of the strategy of how you're actually trying to test change, or how much change actually needs to be orchestrated to actually compared to the one that has to be tested. So it really depends. Now, some of the teams that I've managed in the past, they've been into ratios where there was 1 QA to 8 developers. And again, it was always challenging, but the idea is that when you collaborate and work with the team, then a lot of the quality engineering aspect becomes more quality assistance, because everybody starts to collaborate with each other. But in the same company, I would have 2 QAs to 4 developers where they needed to do a bit more coordination and orchestration of different things that they needed to test. So it really depends. I know everybody tries to look at the right ratio. Is it a pizza size model? The reality is that you have to be contextual to your company to understand what are some of the challenges you have. So to really answer that question is, it depends on your company, and it has depend on the companies I worked.
Do you have favorite BDD tools to formulate feature files?
So for BDD and collaboration, the tool that I've used a lot is really just the native Cucumber. So I haven't actually used any specific tool different to Cucumber. But if we go back to a concept of tool, it might necessarily not be a tool that I need, but it's more a tool as a process, as a tool. So one of the things that I find collaboration works best is when you do communication, and the three amigos and breaking down into the poster notes on how to ask questions, look at ideas, and look at solutions. That as such is being a better tool to then be able to formulate what is it that I actually need to build and automate. So when we're talking about this, what tool do I prefer? It's almost more like the collaboration and talking to people rather than the actual automation tool.
Great. Hopefully I saved the best question for last. Where do you see automation going in the future?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I really think that we're moving towards the orchestration model rather than the scripting model, as I said earlier. As we have more and more interaction with machine learning, more and more tools become smarter what you do, and you become more an orchestrator or integrator of applications. That's where I see automation going. So we're looking at RPA and other things that are actually making use of the current automation frameworks and then orchestrate them together to provide feedback. So that's where I see the future of automation, or again, I will call it more orchestration.
Great. So we are just about at the top of the hour, I think. So that is all the time that we have for today. I want to thank everyone that joined us for this live session, and of course, thank our speaker, Alejandro Sanchez-Giraldo. Before I let Alejandro say his goodbyes, I want to remind you that the link to the recording and the slides will be emailed to you by end of day Monday. That is it from me, and I hope to see you all at our next event.
Thanks, Heidi, and thanks everybody that attended live. I'm sure that if you're in the US, you're probably ready to go out for your holidays, and those ones here in Australia or APAC, you're probably ready to go to your next meeting. So thank you so much for joining me, and you can always reach me out on LinkedIn and read some of my previous articles. Thanks.